for this evening and for a couple of Fridays probably thereafter, I decided to launch out into some aspects of the talks about the esoteric tradition that we may not have touched before, and I'm sure that some of those are going to please you, and that some of you are not going to please you, because pleasing people endlessly is just as boring as making them angry endlessly. And one wishes that some politicians would take that into account. In any event, I didn't really have a very clear plan of how to handle this evening's topic, and I'm sure it will please you endlessly that I still don't have a plan. But let's put it that way, that I felt that it might be useful for us to take a general and yet specific picture of how the esoteric tradition fits into the greater tradition of the world, and draw certain conclusions therefrom. Now, the peregrinations, which is a good ancient word meaning pilgrimages, when you see somebody with a hood over his head and a stick in his hand, and maybe like the pilgrim of the tarot card, the lamp in the other hand, that's a pilgrim. And the pilgrims are often referred to as peregrines. In Tolkien's book on the hobbits, peregrine is the name of a particular hobbit. But it could also, of course, describe a particular person. So that being the case, I decided that the peregrine factor, the pilgrim being in history, is the esoteric tradition. Because as far as we can tell, where we don't have such exact information about all of them, of the different traditions the world over, the esoteric one has been there more frequently than any other, and has also, I would say, really aroused the greatest interest on the part of some people, among whom we may number ourselves, I think. So what this really amounts to is that in every part of the world, in every culture, there would be what can be perhaps referred to as a mainstream tradition. The basic customs and rituals of the people who live there. And then, in addition to that, if you look a little bit behind the trees in the forest, or behind the scrub in the desert, you will discover an alternative tradition, which is not necessarily in contradiction to the mainstream tradition, but often it can add to it, it can make the vision of it more clear, and in various other ways enhance it. In fact, it is by such enhancement that the esoteric tradition, if we can call it that, has come into being. I think it was Mircea Eliade who said that the inner tradition, the mystery tradition, is just as old as the mainstream tradition. Because while, let's say, in the mainstream tradition of a culture, people have priests, have clergymen of some sort, and then others want to get married or die, or maybe are going to do both, and they need people to take care of their psycho-spiritual need. But that in turn ties in with the fact that two groups of people, two hierarchies develop in every culture. And Eliade has primarily based these statements on his studies of shamanism. And he said in primitive society, people have priests. And they marry them and they baptize them or whatever they happen to do to the small children, make them cry, and so forth. But, and take care of, let us say, this sort of basic and often societally involved spiritual needs. But that in addition to that, and almost inevitably, they have not only priests, but they have shamans. The word shaman is of a Siberian origin, of a particular Siberian tribe, and I don't think the scholars have found out yet what it really means. But it is very likely that it had its origins way back in Siberia, when from Mongolia and Tibet the Buddhist monks and missionaries would come over to Siberia, and a particular title for a Mongolian traveling monk is shamanera, and that the shaman was taken from that word. Well, so be it. If that's what they discovered, I'm happy with it. But the issue is that then there is another group of people who are not so much interested in having their own societal or religious needs served, but rather to acquire and maintain a connection with another dimension of reality, another reality of which they are all aware. And I would say that in itself is quite interesting, because we, the so-called civilized people, on the other hand, have very few people who are aware of that fact. Namely, that there is another world, another dimension, other kinds of strange people who have strange inclinations and powers, and which, because of these data, are of interest to us. And so, let's say the origins and the complete character of these strange people, the shamanizers and so forth, remains, I think, a secret. But at the same time, we must remember that there is nevertheless a considerable difference between the ordinary traditions of a quasi-spiritual nature of humanity and of mundane traditions. And that these traditions in themselves are quite important, and they are very well recognized and paid attention to by the people who practice them, because there seems to be a desire, an instinct, whatever we want to call it, a longing for the other reality, the shamanistic reality, the non-ordinary reality in life, which is far more seldom satisfied than we think. And so therefore there must be then developing over history certain traditional teachings, practices, all manner of things which relate to that. Now, that being the case, it is of course true that these recognitions of the other traditions, so to say, have their own characteristics and have their own call to people wherever they are. In Rome, for instance, which is a normative culture and country really for pretty much all of Europe, because if you don't know a little bit of Roman history and don't know enough about the Roman gods and things of that sort, well, I would say then you really don't know too much about yourself and about where you come from and what kind of spiritual ancestry you may have. If you go there, for instance, to Rome, you will soon discover that you will have an attraction towards certain parts, not only of the city, but even of outside the city. And these are the hills, the mountains that overpower Rome, and which were primarily the habitats of the original people who, there's a lot of, I will mention that again, there is a lot of propaganda nowadays about, the original people of various places, the native people, where these were as far as we can discover, the original native people of the Apennine Peninsula, and they were referred to as the Etruscans. And these Etruscans were typical shamanistic magicians. They were particularly the Etruscan women, who were subsequently referred to mostly as witches, stregas and so forth. They sat in nice little caves in the mountains, and people went up there to have their fortune told and in various ways occultly be accommodated. So let's say they were there as a sort of bedrock of an ancient culture upon which, like upon good soil, solid soil, one could build various things in one's life. And I tell you, I don't think I am in a habit of fooling myself too much, at least not more than the average person, and just getting close to those old hills with their caves gave me a very peculiar feeling. We even had an Etruscan place of meeting in the basement of the house where we were living, where we were in, let's see, what's the town where we were at?
Tivoli?
Yeah, in Tivoli. From Tivoli you look up the mountains and you can see all the little caves and curious little things, but we were further down and we were in a disused monastery, but in Tivoli, and it itself was full of Etruscan and similar early remains. In the basement there was a whole area of what did the people refer to it, the fairy basement or something of that sort, which was a little temple to the fairies, to the nature spirits whom the Etruscans revered. And then further up there was a beautiful orchard of tremendously impressive ancient olive trees. So those of you who like olives would be quite happy there, and various other features like that. So let us say in the really old places where people have lived for a long time, these things are present. Because people have an inward longing, there is a psychological need for the, I suppose you could call it supernatural, the unusual, the extraordinary. And they are looking for it wherever they are. I have lived in, for prolonged periods of time, in two different portions of rural Hungary, in different parts of the country. And in each place there were plenty of legends about all the nature spirits, the demons, the strange and mysterious creatures that were in the countryside. Now if you go on that way and then you take a left and you take a right and then you're on the mountain, there you're probably going to meet them in various statements like that. I can't say that I have very much, I had very much experiences as the result of these indications, but they were there and the people believed in them primarily because they had experienced them themselves. So let's say there are shamanistic local traditions in practically all places, and these are of very great importance to the people, because whatever the agnostics, the non-gnostics, and other prosaic-minded people in our culture may feel, it is a vital psychological need of every human being to have a relationship to the other world. Now, the other world you can define in various places. I don't mean just the world of the dead, but still the world that is not physical, the world that is not ordinary, that is really an extraordinary world where extraordinary events take place. And it is from this natural desire and need of the human psyche that let's say the whole search for the extraordinary, for the supernatural, for the unusual came, because that is a legitimate and perpetual need within us, even if we are not aware of it, and having that particular need, we will find ways of dealing with it and of expressing it. So don't ever think that because you have experienced something ghostly, let us say, or something fairy-like or whatever, that these are pathological symptoms of deranged minds, including yours, because it's not a derangement. It is the fineness, of the observation of some people, that they observe more beings, more creatures, more phenomena in life than others. And to admit that we thus are impressed, and perhaps to look into it a little further, or perhaps write books about it. As you know, the greatest modern scholar of Tibetan Buddhism was a Californian gentleman named Evans Wentz. That was double name. And Mr. Evans Wentz wrote his doctoral dissertation in Oxford. Now that's not an easy place to do that sort of thing. And you know what it was about? Fairy faith in Celtic countries. And it's a heck of a good book too. You know. So the thing is that a good historical or anthropological interest has to include that which is beyond the border, beyond the immediately discernible, because our lives and our world are more all-encompassing than that. So I would say common sense, the kind of common sense that recognizes, look, there's a heck of a lot of stuff going on around here that I would like to understand, but I don't, and I'm going to look into it. That is a more rational argument than almost any other. And this is important to remember. So let us say we need to be aware of all that ordinarily we are not aware of. What is behind the curtain of our conscious cognition may be more important, more revealing, at times perhaps more inspiring than what appears to us openly. And so the natural inquisitiveness of the human consciousness, of the human mind, is the origin of the esoteric tradition, as it has said. Because there are, of course, exoteric traditions. And then there are others that are hidden, but still discernible. And this latter category, which is hidden but discernible, for instance, gives rise, in my estimation, to most of the mythology of the world. Because in mythic statements, in mythic stories, that hitherto unknown and mysterious factor comes forth and exercises an influence on human consciousness, which becomes becomes something, I don't know what it becomes now. Slightly diverted. But let us say where the imagination, the magic of the imagination, conjoins with some data of the physical world and perhaps of the intellectual world as well, there springs then another reality which has sort of two faces, like the Roman god Janus. You ever seen statues or things of Janus has a face looking this way, and he has another face looking that way. So I wouldn't want to encounter him on Beechwood Drive after midnight, but he's the two-faced God. And so a lot of things in this world are two-faced. And if we only look at their prosaic nature, their ordinary nature, the things that they can disclose to us about ordinary things, then we have one face. But on the other hand, there are others. And that these others usually, once sufficiently investigated, sufficiently paid attention to, can be quite revealing and lead us to yet further insights. This is where the power of imagination comes into the picture, what already in ancient times they called imaginatio, thereby, in Latin, thereby recognizing that if we exercise a certain faculty within us, which is the imagination, we can create, we can bring into tangible existence certain forces and certain persons, even beings in the world, in nature and in humanity that otherwise would elude us. For which reason I have always tried, not always successfully, to convince adults who have the grace of having children to please cultivate their imagination. Don't tell them, oh, you're just imagining things, that. But look for it further. Look what motives there might be in the imagination, and also how they may relate to the ordinary life of the individual, because in so doing we can come up with a combination that may be extremely valuable to the child and to all those people associated with the child. Imagination, the very term imaginatio in Latin, really originated with magicians. And if you look into church history, you will find that the all-time greatest magician cultivating the imagination was Saint Albertus Magnus, a German archbishop and previously, I think, Benedictine father, who said that with the imagination you can supplement what God hasn't shown you yet. With the imagination you can stretch the limits of the magic of the world that God has created for you. And therefore you have to use it. Don't ever put it down as an insignificant thing. And I believe that he was the good, he was an Archbishop of Regensburg, I think, Albertus. And he's also the patron saint of all magicians in some other books. Some big magical grimoires are allegedly written by Albertus. In any event, the imagination is important. of course one cannot fall victim of it entirely, because if you lose the demarcation lines between your imagination and between other more solid external realities, then you may also damage your psychic health to some extent. But the imagination has to be there, and with its help, great and wonderful things can be accomplished. Doesn't mean that everything that comes up with the imagination is wonderful, far from it. But on the other hand, it's also not just your imagination, but there is always something there that at some point will be useful to you, that is important, that you should pay attention to. I resist the great temptation to tell you of some of the imaginary experiences that I had when I was a child and that I never forgot, because it's just the sort of thing that happens. Most people deny it. Most people close their eyes and say, no, I didn't see that, I didn't experience that. But that is primarily an act of denial and of running away from the experience. Experience is important, no matter what it is, whether it's an experience of a ghost, whether it's an experience of something that happened to you long time ago, or any of the other. As long as you can in some way assert and swear by that it is your experience, then hang on to it as much as you can, because something there is important. Something there is something that you will need, and perhaps need right now, because the imagination opens up avenues of being, of existence that otherwise are not available. Now, how I got turned now on this imaginary road, I don't know, but I did. And let us just say that it is a natural faculty of the human being. And when we don't exercise our natural faculties and don't exercise them in a sufficient manner, you are depriving we are depriving ourselves. We are diminishing the field of our cognition. Now, of course, there is the experience, and then there is the explanation of the experience. The two are not always the same. I would say that many explanations of on occult nature, and occult means hidden. It was hidden to you before, and now you think that you're getting it out, it's no longer hidden, have been brought to daylight and have been explored and have contributed to human life and to human knowledge. So that means now, inasmuch as we have these possibilities and these qualities, it is natural that there will be an auxiliary function of consciousness, auxiliary simply meaning helping, something there helping our consciousness to make itself wider, make itself bigger, make itself more interesting, more rewarding for us to delve into it. I very well remember as a child when I would have astonishing dreams and pseudo-dreams still, to go back to them and look at them and try to figure out what they were really trying to tell me was always a great joy. And it still is, because that is the way it should be. Anything that comes to you in word or image or idea, and that is unusual to you, is worth looking at. Because why did it come? Why? Because you needed it in some facet of your being, you needed it. People need to be aware of ghosts. People need to be aware of, I don't know, all kinds of other weird creatures. Because when all is said and done, these unusual creatures, whether they be dragons or magic serpents or anything of that sort, have something to communicate to us, something to enrich our consciousness by. And it is not really a good idea to dismiss experiences from your life which might, with sufficient attention, enrich your life, make your life more powerful and more able cognitively or any other way. We are here to learn. We are not here to tell other people what they ought to learn, which happens so often, you shouldn't believe in those things, something else. And so that being the case, it is a natural phenomenon that there should be an esoteric or occult world and tradition in humanity, no doubt varying in various details from people to people, from continent to continent, but still always being there. And to the extent that it gains a reasonable amount of acceptance and perhaps utilization, to that extent it had redounded to our benefit. Now this long sauce that I have poured forth here really just boils up to one thing. Be alert, be careful, be interested in your own experiences and in the experiences of reliable others, in order to learn, in order to experience realities that you have not experienced before, and thereby to expand the circle of your consciousness, the magic circle. That is the original magic circle. Yes. It's the circle in the middle of which you are. And what comes in there comes in with a purpose. Now you say, well, what if the purpose is bad? Well, you know what, I think that you might very well remember that a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of radio programs, which are the ones that I listen to all the time, come into you possibly in order to get something from you, to explore you, and maybe take your consciousness somewhere that they want to, because the inquisitive matrix is a very, very important facet of consciousness, which doesn't mean at the same time that whatever we acquire by way of the inquisitive matrix is the God's truth. Maybe that's why the term God's truth has been invented, that there is human truth animal truth, and maybe even plant truth, and then there is God's truth, which is probably the one that is not going to crumble away in your hand, and you should pay attention to. But in any event, the world is a big process of disclosure to us of facts, of data, of ideas, of legends, of stories, because by paying attention to them, we do what perhaps we may have been sent onto this world to do. Learn, learn, learn. And not just things that you will be able to make money with, which is certainly in this commercial civilization of ours a useful commodity, but learn in order to deal with various issues and situations and problems which come your way and for which you have found no other solution. Now the esoteric tradition supplies especially that need. That in other words, in civilizations which are civilized, really deserve to be called civilized, you will find an inner need, an inner desire to look at and to evaluate various experiences, various things that you hear, things that you see, things that you have contact with, in order to do what? Oh, well, in our civilizations they would say, well, obviously in order to make money, or in order to have fun. No, that's a little more valuable, because money in itself hardly ever equals fun. And I'm sure that most of you have learned that already. You don't need to be indoctrinated about it. But there are various experiences that come to us which in retrospect, in some way or the other, are going to enrich our life, our consciousness, our being. That is the reason for having the alternative or occult tradition, and for the interest in the traditions and pursuits like psychical research and so forth in the world, the books about ghosts and so forth, because there is some little knowledge seeker inside of us who is knocking on us and says, hey, open up the door, that ghost story is interesting, okay? Do it, will you? It'll be great. If you don't have an ear for that part in ourselves, well then you are impoverishing yourself. You're taking abilities away from you. So we have to keep these things in mind. And but we also have forces, counter forces, which confuse the matter. And in my estimation, and after having read tons and tons of books and journals on the subject, the field of psychical research and related subjects, I have found often very, very poor in any meaningful disclosure, because the ability of the researchers, the scientists, to explain difficult things is very difficult itself. To try to explain ghosts, to try to explain vampires, one might as well go for the throat, you know. So all of this is a largely futile endeavor because we don't have the means whereby to create an explanation of these matters that would be plausible, veridical, possibly being able to be translated into manageable material, and therefore it is hard to deal with. Yet it is tremendously interesting. Ghost stories, vampire stories, whatever you got hold of, are tremendously interesting because we have not been able to solve them. We have not been able to pick them up and put them on a shelf in our house, and that frustrates us. Why can't I deal with that? Why can't I accept a ghost? Why can't I accept the super guru from Bombay or somebody? Because I have to do something more. Something needs to be done. Now, the reason I brought this up and at such great length is that the discovery and the dealing with the unusual is a natural human need. And those who deny it or do not wish to deal with it, I think are depriving themselves of much material that would feed their consciousness and give them new insights to deal with. Now, that being the case, that is why we have an esoteric tradition. Because among the traditions that we can look at this is what Orthodox Christianity says about it, this is what another approach says, and it's still not that interesting. So Jesus rose from the grave. Well, apparently people do that now and then. So people can put it aside as not anything of a terribly unusual character. But when you look profoundly and with genuine interior interest at the strange phenomena and those involved in these phenomena throughout the ages, that's a different matter. And here we are dealing with entire traditions that develop out of the unknown, out of the mysterious, out of that which still needs exploration. Because I think everybody is likely to agree that an awful lot of activities, instrumentalities that we are dealing with here in this world, even scientific and mechanical and so forth, is due to the fact that there is something there that we have not been able to explore entirely and explore to our satisfaction. Now then, what may we say about entire traditions that develop along those lines? What may we say about the coronation which was done with an eagle's feathers of the Emperor of Rome? What may we say about the Vestal Virgins who had the powers to foretell the future? What may we say about so many of these things? From observing the Aborigines, say in Australia, to other and more complex activities. So we need to keep in mind that the esoteric is based on experience. If people did not experience ghosts, nature spirits, weird stuff, then there wouldn't be such a tradition. There wouldn't be any interest, there wouldn't be any Dr. Rhine, there wouldn't be anything of that sort. It is human experience that gave rise to all of these. And since human experience, being human, is always around, it continues. So you may say, oh, well, there is no such thing. But then look in the newspaper and you see an article and it will tell you that there was such a phenomenon just yesterday in, I don't know, in other parts of the city. So that the existential reality of the other dimensions cannot be denied. Only the explanations of that reality can be denied. And those in turn are, I'm sure you will agree, are greatly influenced by the worldview, the orientation of consciousness of individual people. I was in this country for a number of years before the flying saucer craze developed. And here, strange events occurred, but all of a sudden, I don't say everything, but the overwhelming majority of the strange phenomena was attributed to our space brothers up there. Now, I am not making fun of them, but let us say, when there is an explanation that appears to us plausible, then that's what we blame the unusual phenomena on. And this we have to be very careful of, because in so doing, and doing it a lot, we can fool ourselves, and we can fool other people depending on what relationships we have with other people. So we must be careful, because to be truthful is a very strange thing in itself. And I'm not even going to go very much into that. But we can have utterly convincing, terrific memories of experiences, and yet telling an experience that is utterly false. So, we have to be careful, because we don't want to deceive ourselves, we don't want to deceive others. And that is why perhaps the religious field is the one wherein these unusual experiences have the greatest role. Because in religion there is belief, and the belief, at least ultimately, if we are able to trace the belief back all the way to its origin, the belief is based in somebody's experience. And that experience is very often what is called a miracle, or many other names. So one has to be careful here, and also one has to be careful not to assume that ordinary prosaic people will listen to unusual experiences and accept them. There has to be an occult mind that responds to an occult experience. I have known quite a few, and I think that that's why it is a good idea to know some people like that, because they can open up our eyes to the greater, the unusual, and the exciting. Now, so let us move on from these general considerations to the continued existence of I can't really express it in other words, an entire tradition. A tradition that has come down father to son and mother to from mother to daughter, in one after the other, and which addresses itself to those aspects of life which we have not previously encountered in consciousness or otherwise. And yet it is there. And when then comes the unusual day that all of a sudden you have a certain kind of experience and you don't know what to make of it, you start looking into it and you find out that you had an occult, previously hidden, paranormal experience, and then you look into it further. So these things are important, and one should have an open mind in the direction of the nature of new experience. When you have a new experience that you haven't had before, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be new, then to look into what that might be and to continue along that line of inquiry is not a bad thing. By no means. It can be very, very helpful. So that being the case then, I think we can tentatively agree that there is an occult tradition that is composed of the experiences and their explanations that people came up with of various unusual events. And that when these all are added together, we develop a conviction regarding some of these matters, be they ghosts, be they nature spirits, be they dragons of olden days, or whatever we may come up with. But the experience translates into teaching. And then, if you are honest, the teaching may develop into doctrine, which is the combination of teachings. And so this kind of tradition, occult tradition, mysterious tradition, will be always here, because human beings are so far always here. As long as we are here, there will be people experiencing unusual things and trying to draw conclusions from these. Now, I have also promised myself, although not to you, that I would add to this a little bit of historical speculation. Let us say that there are some people here on earth who have a tendency to mistake their imagination, their fantasy, for physical reality. And then sometimes these folk, or many of these folks, will write books or will avail themselves of publicity of some kind or the other, and try to spread or market their imagination on a wider scale. What do we do there? I think if we are wise about it, then we recognize that this kind of propaganda of the occult, which does not originate in anything concrete, also has its validity, and that its veracity, its workability, its reality, in fact, need to be tested. Let's say, I'll give you a little example. In my opinion, and I'm probably not because of it, but I'll say it anyway, the French Revolution and its effects was the greatest catastrophe of Western culture in history. And why was that so? Because in it, the fantasies of the mind, the demons of thought could come and get hold of a couple of people who were sitting in the British Museum and who thought that they were writing the truth. And they were Engels and Marx. And we haven't recovered from it yet. Because to believe that something is true and for it to be true, that's two very different things. Now, what we need to keep in mind is that there are certain forces of sources that are able to put a brake on our imagination. And if we use those, then we can quiet down the wild imaginations of people like Marx and Engels and others. But we have to have an inbuilt critical thought and not be overwhelmed by the words, the torrents of words, the great rivers of words that come to us from media or other sources. So let's be aware of that. Let's have our own internal censor. And with that internal censor, we can cut down on the excesses of the imagination, even if that imagination pretends to be scientific or scholarly or anything of that sort. If we can do that, that is the proper self-criticism, the criticism of our own imagination. And when we are able to put that into activity, then things are better. Now, I'm not going to go further on this because it's also slightly political. But let's say there came a movement of thought which did ultimately a tremendous amount of damage in the world. And this movement of thought was the Jacobinism because of a certain historical circumstance of the French Revolution. And as such, certain fanatical falsehoods have penetrated into the body politic, into people, and we have never been rid of them since. So what we need to keep in mind is that we have within ourselves, but of course that should be aware of anyone with some contact with the esoteric tradition. We should be aware that we have internal sensors, we have internal ways of stopping the kind of propaganda that is false and that comes to us from elsewhere. And so being, we can cut down on the falsehood that comes into the world. If let me say, incidentally, just to maybe lighten some heavy weights of memory, I have seen my own eye and in print Madame Blavatsky's statement: anybody who is a communist should never be a member of our society. Okay? Well, to me it's okay. Maybe not. In other words, she said that there were some tremendous falsehoods that came into the world. Do you know, for instance, where communism comes from? Well, around the 1860s, there was a war. Well, there is one today also. But let's see, there was a war which was the Franco-Prussian War. The Kingdom of Prussia, under the leadership of Otto Bismarck, attacked France and beat up the French pretty badly. So, let's say, soon thereafter, France sort of fell apart. And that falling apart was called the Commune, La Commune. And so somebody who went along with the extremely weird and destructive ideas of the people in the Commune was called a communist. And that stuck. And it's still there. So let's say it's important to remember that we can come up with wild and weird and disastrous ideas which will continue to contribute to the torture and the slaughter and the terror of good people for decades and centuries to come if we are not careful with that. It is so easy to fall in love with your own ideas. Why? Because they're mine. I mean, if they were yours, I wouldn't bother with it. and that is, I think, what has happened with Marxism in its wilder or less wild manifestations. And I think the time has come to be a little more aware of that and to sit on our own horses and not on the horses that some weird people in the 1840s cooked up for the terrifying of humanity. So here we are. We have to be careful. We have to be wise. And we have to be good. Because if you look at and unfortunately I had to some extent, go into a school that was turning communist, I had to look at the writings of these gentlemen in the 19th century, and I tell you, you don't have to be a very wise or a very learned man to see that it is sheer balderdash. Sheer balderdash, or there are other words for it, poppycock, nonsense, and so forth. And that therefore we always have to maintain our God-given judgment, our deeper judgment that comes from a deeper place, and not fall victim to the deceptions of the human mind. There don't even have to be demons involved. You know, I think Marx said at one time that among all the bad gods in the world, one should start worshipping Satan. I don't know whether he did it. How can you worship something that you don't believe in? You know? But in any event, let's keep in mind that the esoteric tradition has its own rationale, has its own clear sight, has its own vision, which ultimately is true because it comes from the truth. If we are not inclined in that, then we might turn to other traditions. But in any event, the occult tradition, the esoteric tradition, has always been in the world. It is based on experience of the other side of reality, and as such, it will endure, and it will have its day, and it will become triumphant in its own way and in its own time. So thank you very much.